Alright, the subject I chose for this video was the origin of the mitochondria, because I thought it was very interesting, and it was not talked about very much in the lecture slides of the textbook. The mitochondria, the origin, we think, as far as we know, is something called the endosymbiotic theory, which basically means that one organism, in this case the mitochondria, is living inside another, in this case the remainder of the eukaryotic cell, and it is actually a symbiotic relationship, which means that both of those organisms benefit. The mitochondria, because obviously it has somewhere to live, and the eukaryotic cell, because it gets basically a little energy generator. This theory was first proposed by a Russian botanist in 1905 and then again in 1910, and I can't even come close to saying his name, but it was more thoroughly outlined by a biologist named Lynn Margulis in a paper in 1967, and she went through and outlined what they thought was the mechanism by which this occurred, as well as the evidence that they have found for this. And so we'll start through with the mechanism, which is this image here. And I obviously did not make this image. Pearson made this image. It was nice of them. So essentially what it states, the theory states, is that over time the plasma membrane folded up and folded up and folded up, and it made most of what we think of the organelles of a eukaryotic cell, like the nuclear envelope and the endoplasmic reticulum and the nucleus and all that, the endomembrane system. But over time, we think that the mitochondria was actually originally a completely separate prokaryotic cell, but for some reason it was eaten, or, well, they think that it may have been endocytosis, which is where basically just the larger soon-to-be eukaryotic cell just kind of swallowed it. But there's also the theory that it may have been a parasite, actually, that we just developed a very close relationship with. And over time, the mitochondria became inseparable from the eukaryotic cell, and the eukaryotic cell became inseparable from the mitochondria. The mitochondria can't survive on its own anymore, and neither can the eukaryotic cell. So now they're both totally dependent on each other, but the theory is that originally they were actually separate organisms. And they have several pieces of evidence for this. First of all, we know that mitochondria have their own DNA that is separate from the DNA in the nucleus of the cell. And mitochondria can only be formed via binary fission, which is basically takes one and splits it apart, and then you have two. And this is how bacteria and archaea reproduce, but obviously eukaryotic cells don't reproduce that way. They reproduce via mitosis. And the cell, the larger cell, can't create new mitochondria if the mitochondria that are in there are removed. So if you take them out, they don't have the means to make a new one, which means that they have to get new ones via the binary fission process. They don't have the DNA to make mitochondria. And there are proteins that are on the outside edge of a mitochondria, right along here, called porins. And those porins are also found on the cell membranes of prokaryotic cells. And the one that I personally find most convincing is there's a membrane lipid called cardiolipin that is only found on the inner membrane of the mitochondria, which you can see here. It's that bit there. And the only other place that this is found is in a bacterial cell, and a prokaryotic cell. So personally, I believe that this theory has merit. I think it is certainly the most accurate one that we have right now. And I guess that's basically it. And I hope you enjoyed it.